Are there others out there that do similar work to what you do, or?
There's related work being performed, but my methodology is unique to my practice.
Okay.
So people are studying the subject and learned about it through late night radio in the United States in the 1990s, and tens of thousands of people purchased equipment related to using this, analog tape equipment. But in terms of actual practitioners, it's a very small field. In terms of practitioners with track records for results, it's extremely slim. So I remain a leading practitioner globally in this field. But it's yet accessible to everyone who's gifted.
It's probably a more inexpensive pursuit now with technology advancements, etc., than it was probably back then, right?
Well, computers and software still cost money.
Yes, of course.
You need some resources, but you don't need enormous resources. It's accessible to someone on an average income can access this if they wish to pursue it. If they wish to pursue some level of training and gain some experience with it. It can be done.
I guess the biggest thing is motivation. They have to be motivated too, because it appears to me as a tedious task.
So when people are first learning and exploring new avenues of sensing, there's certain dimensions that are psychological, and they'll have encounters with content that will be elicited through that process, and they will have individual processing and healing that will come with that. And so early on, when persons learn to be a good listener, a lot of the material that they will begin to pick up on will be subjective for them. It'll be their own information coming to the surface. It will be elicited by the strange stimulus, the speech sounds played in reverse.
Right.
But beyond that, the possibility of beginning to become clear and beginning to have lucid perceptions exists. And that can be more firmly established through feedback processes. One of the areas in a related sort of sensing area is something called remote viewing that many people may have heard of.
Yeah.
And one of the founding figures in remote viewing was a fellow named Ingo Swann.
Yes.
And Ingo Swann wrote in his book, Penetration, that at the time they were formulating the designs for remote viewing, he felt that the pursuit of any target where feedback would not be possible was not worth pursuing. In other words, in my lifetime, I don't expect to be able to figure out what's happening on the dark side of the Andromeda galaxy, or to go there and perceive for myself what's going on. Therefore, speculations about that question are not as worthy as something that might be going on down the street where I can investigate and receive feedback. So my clinical model, I work with individuals on a one-on-one basis, and I inquire as to the significance of the messages that come up through the session. What do they mean to the speaker? And feedback is facilitated through that means, so that we're not blindly using a shotgun approach.
Of course.
We're engaged in a dialogue, and two participants, a practitioner and a subject, are exploring.
There's a context to what it is we're pursuing too then.
Essentially individuals are coming, they're looking for answers and possible solutions, possible resolutions. They may be aware of issues. Most likely, the majority of individuals that I've worked with had unresolved traumas from childhood, and those traumas led to inhibitors in performance and growth challenges later in their adult life, and they wanted to reclaim the creative inner child and the potential that that was locked up and obstructed through unresolved trauma psychologically. They wanted to reclaim that, reintegrate, and heal. And this sort of became the premise. I typically expect that there's certain types of childhood trauma that subjects who approach me for this kind of work will have faced, and I'm very, very experienced because that's been the majority of the caseload that I've faced. But yet again, what these lead to, these windows through the voice, these messages become windows into consciousness and levels of consciousness.
Subconsciousness probably as well.
That are visceral.
Yeah.
And people will evoke particular feelings, and what is most interesting to me as a practicing yogi is that the feeling centers where people say, when I heard that message, I felt something here, or I felt something at this location.
Right, and you were able to recognize what they were feeling and where they were feeling it and how that impacts them probably.
The significance to me was that the chakras were the locations that they were pointing to.
Of course, yeah.
And so I would invite them through very simple exercises using inner sound and inner feeling or inner vision to access those locations where they would feel the most stimulation. As you were saying earlier, you felt goosebumps.
Yes.
Where did you feel the goosebumps?
I felt them in my arms, all over my back.
And so I would invite you, I'd say, well, you know, with your eyes closed, you know, with your inner vision, if you looked in those places, what would you see? And if you could hear a sound,
Wow.
what would you hear? And
Wow.
if it was an inner feeling, what would that be? And it would be more often than not that through one of those pathways, the participant would have a lot to say. They would say, well, you know, I'm seeing myself as a young person and in this particular situation, and, you know, this is what's going on.
So it's almost like a NLP or a low-level hypnosis in a sense, where they're going into their subconscious, not even realizing they are.
It's a window into that level of consciousness,
Yeah.
exactly. However, the messages are serving as an induction. It's the audio, this isn't a formal hypnotic induction by any means.
No, of course. Yeah.
But we can say from that model, from the hypnotic model, that the
Yeah.
messages or those sounds, the stimulus,
Yeah.
provokes a hypnotic response.
Yeah.
But not in the sense that I'm attempting to, how to say,
To elicit a hypnotic response.
or that I am attempting to enforce any particular point of view upon the
Okay.
participant.
Right.
I'm inquiring as to what they're perceiving.
That's right.
It's their guidance that leads the session, and I'm only there to
Facilitate that.
You know, it's an intervention with a second person. You see, when people come together in a common cause, they become strengthened in an exponential way to resolve problems that they themselves may not be able to do on their own. When people join together in a common way for a short period of time, we can move a lot faster. And this is what happens in these interventions. So the role of practitioner is to facilitate. The role of participant is to work with the materials to the best of their ability. But I say that in my sessions, the level of power is very high. People who say they're not very visual and may not even have visual dreams will say that in the session that their visual acuity, their inner sensing, and their inner vision is highly empowered, and they see very colorful images.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
these sounds have this very provocative impact. You know, in yoga it's understood philosophically that sound is like the most subtle layer of expression at the earliest stages of creation of even our cosmology.
Right.
And so the power of sound
And
cannot be
even the
underestimated.
words we're perceiving are perception, because ultimately it's just sound, it's just frequency and energy, right?
We're receiving information on different levels that are not even physical through those sounds. You know, in the Greek philosophies, I believe it was Aristotle who proposed what's called the harmonic series, or the overtones. And we understand that we have a fundamental musical tone, and we have higher tones, octaves and partial octaves above that. And we know that if we take a guitar and leave an open string and pluck a very high note consistently, repeatedly, just like the yogi who recites the mantra, the lower string will start to vibrate because of the sympathetic resonance. This is what Aristotle noted, is that these sympathetic resonances occur. With a piano, when we lift the damper pedal, we release the pedal, and we strike a high note repeatedly, that high note energizes a low tone, and we will hear the low strings resonate as a consequence of that interaction. In yoga, the model means that the human voice and its range, it's 1 or 2 octave range depending on the individual. Within the scope of that range occur these higher harmonics of lower or cosmic fundamental tones. In science,
And there's tones within tones, if I'm not mistaken.
certainly, but bear with me
Okay.
as I say that the Big Bang theory that some scientists still embrace.
Right.
There's something called the background sound of the universe that we can still perceive, which is understood to be the remnant of that initial explosion. The background sound of the universe, and it's something like 52 octaves below middle C. That's its actual musical
And we know
status.
that.
That's what you read in the scientific journals.
Okay.
When people talk about black holes and the sounds coming from the black holes, they talk about that cosmic sound, 52 octaves below or 57 octaves below. Well, if we understand what Aristotle said about harmonics, we know that somewhere up the chain, the harmonic chain of overtones, comes the range of the human voice. And so by that same means, we can invoke that cosmic level through the overtones.
Wow. Wow.
So the cosmic phenomena that take place within the human body are as accessible, and these messages serve in that overtone principle. They serve in a way to enforce and empower cosmic processes of creativity and healing within individuals. And this is what we see empirically. Typically, we see catharsis in one session. in one 60 to 90 minute session.
Wow.
It's got to do with the power of those sounds and the power within each of us. You know, we speak
To
and we
express,
talk.
yeah.
If some of us are not gifted in hearing or speech, but for the majority of us, we take it for granted, just like we walk, we breathe, we take it for granted.
I've taken voice lessons, so I have a sensational experience of voice and sound. So.
You're sensitive to that.
Yes, absolutely.
When we study that, we become sensitive to, gee, I thought I was listening before, but now I'm starting to really listen.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like that. So we have all this potential. In the mundane is this great gift, you see? It's this pearl in the oyster, it's this diamond in the coal. It exists within us. And so these studies, these
I
clinical...
think everyone should take that.
It's a beneficial to everybody, absolutely. We're all talkers and listeners, but we can empower that beyond our imaginations to resolve some of the issues that we felt were insurmountable.
Yeah.
We can resolve them, and so quickly, and that's very inspiring. However, beyond initial healing and so on, it's that instruction, it's that witnessing of ourselves and seeing ourselves resolving problems that we thought we would never resolve.
Yeah.
We learn about ourselves and our potential at that moment.
Yeah.
We suddenly realize,
So it's a knowing of self in the process of resolving whatever it is you were attempting to heal in the first place.
if I can solve this problem, what else can I overcome?
Right.
Like that. And that learning is something we take for our lifetime.
Absolutely.
You see, we may be happy one day and sad the next. We may see the Sasquatch and then we may get chewed out by the counselor. It's always going to be like that. We can't change that. It's always day and night in this universe. But we can learn about our great potential to overcome in spite of the odds and the obstacles. Within us is a greater potential, and it's up to us to harness and magnify that in our lives. And the voice is one of the avenues to do that.
So how did you go from speech analysis for healing to speech analysis of political leaders, athletes, etc.?
Because there was great demand in the media for that content, and I was called upon.
Oh, so you were called upon. It wasn't like you were motivated to do it yourself.
It became a means to reach the average person, because when we talk about healing, well, that's a niche community already.
Right.
Most people are not in Canada. If it's got to do with beer and hockey, now that's interesting. Politics, not so interesting. United States politics, very interesting. So to reach the largest community possible, in order to make sure that I was able to reach those who could most benefit from this work, I determined to reach the largest communities I possibly could. And through radio, I spoke to up to 20 million people at one time. So I pursued those opportunities with vigor, because I realized again that they would allow me access to the largest audience possible, in order that those few who could benefit from this would be certain to have heard about the opportunity.
Okay.
And that led to a role as a feature producer for CBS Radio, and #1 Nielsen rating on CBS Television, and all kinds of appearances on the BBC London, Deutschland Radio Berlin, CBC Radio, all kinds of different, as I said, there was no limit to who would want to talk to me about this work and explore it with me. I had years and years. During US presidential elections, I would be called upon for 10 interviews a day for 3 days in a row.
Wow.
To participate in panel conversations about candidates and my analysis and its contribution to those discussions. Parallel to those studies, I began to produce a body of photographic work.
Okay.
And the photographic work went back to my yogic practices and recitals of mantras and the pressing of the shutters, because as I said, as an adolescent, a teenager, I had many profound experiences, and those really intensified when I started engaging in spontaneous recital of Sanskrit. At that time, I just went with the flow. I didn't necessarily understand what was happening, but I would, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, it came from within me, this sense of evocation, and as I practiced that, in my poetic way, all kinds of phenomena would manifest. At those times, I didn't have any cameras, so I never...
It's interesting that you didn't have an attachment to those forms, and yet you still experienced through just recitation.
Because I believe that I in previous incarnations, I had been deeply indoctrinated in those philosophies. Yeah. So at those times, I didn't have a camera, but I remembered those times vividly. I mean, they left an indelible impression on my mind. All those events that happened of entities, who would appear right in front of me and all kinds of stuff. So I decided that I would, employ the camera as a 21st century yogi. In the digital age, I would employ the camera to attempt to capture some of those events, and I feel that I was very successful in doing so over a period of over 10 years.